Welcome back to Coding in the Cinema. It is Film Noir Friday night review time, and I'm going to be discussing one of the fundamental, foundational pieces of filmmaking that got me interested in movies as a youngin'. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And I do consider this to be one of the all-time great film noir movies ever made. So if you have never seen this, or if you don't remember it, I'll just give you a little refresher, okay? Because this thing is so good. So, Roger Rabbit is a toon. And in this movie, there are the cartoons, the toons, and there are the people. They're like two different social classes. And some folks are maybe mad at Roger. We don't exactly know why he's in trouble, so to speak. But this other character who's sort of a hard-boiled, hard-drinking detective, Eddie Valiant, played by, in a wonderful performance by Bob Hoskins. He's been hired to take incriminating photos of Jessica Rabbit or some kind of photos that will disrupt Roger Rabbit's life. I'm going to kind of dance around the edges there to not spoil anything. And this leads to a series of events that causes Roger Rabbit to be fairly or unfairly, we're not sure, framed for a murder, thus, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And a lot of the film is about how this detective starts maybe siding with this bunny, or rabbit, Roger Rabbit. And this is difficult for Eddie because his brother was killed by a toon. You know, and he's really not dealing well with that. He drinks himself to sleep. We see that his office is a mess. And a lot of this movie is sort of the self-redemption that Eddie has to go through while dealing with all the craziness of Toontown and another sort of corporate giant lurking in the corners that's trying to destroy everything. If the plot sounds ridiculous, it is, but it's rational in its own strange way. So what this film does and what makes it so unique is that it truly sets cartoons in the same world alongside humans. There is very little difference between the two worlds. There are tons of examples of how well Robert Zemeckis did with this, but just to name a few, you'll see another character, Jessica Rabbit, who's kind of modeled after one of the old Hollywood actresses. She'll pull on his tie, like the animated toon, and then he'll move with it. And you kind of can't figure out sometimes how that happened. You'll see Eddie in his sink pretending to wash something, and there will be a character dunked in the water in and out, and he might as well have just been holding a person in and out of the water. There's no real distinction between what's real and what's not. And this creates an organic world that is some of the best world building you could see in movies. Okay? If you haven't ever seen this movie, you'll very quickly catch on to all of how this is the case. In fact, the Siskel and Ebert review of this, if you've never checked it out, they kind of explain like how bewildered they were by the effects side of this. So from the standpoint of effects, this is just an all-time great movie, okay? It also does a good job of leaning into the noir elements. So all over the place, even though it's in color, right, because there's cartoons, it really feels like some old black and white film noir. There are tons of references to things like Chinatown, which is in color, but Double Indemnity. There's even like one of the transports that Bob Hoskins' character is on. It even has like Sunset Boulevard as a destination on the vehicle. And it's just loaded with film noir references. And what works so well with the toon world and the human world is kind of how Bob Hoskins brings those two together. So Roger Rabbit is a silly rabbit who acts within the rules that the movie makes for cartoons. He's nearly indestructible. He laughs. He's joking all the time. And he's a cartoon, but he's sort of like living within the cartoon limits of reality, which is that near indestructibility, and also still being in the world. But Bob Hoskins, see, he's so dead serious the whole time that this film is playing that, like, he's just kind of bored with the tunes. He's sick of them. He even hates them in a way because of what happened with his brother. And for us to see him just act sort of jaded and angered by the existence of tunes, while we're just like for the first time trying to even figure out what's going on, it really sells the reality of the world. This thing brings together some Disney characters. It brings together Warner Brothers characters. There are little tunes that have a great impact, like a little shoe that walks along and bounces. There's maybe a prop gag tune. It could be like a punching cartoon that knocks over some crates. It's really one of the, like I said, technical marvels of film history as far as I'm concerned. And I love it so much, if nothing else on that level. There are other great supporting cast members. Dolores is awesome, sort of an ex on and off girlfriend of Bob Hoskins. And then Christopher Lloyd is terrific as Judge Doom. He's wearing all black. He's got a little hat, a little cane, sort of a classic film noir character, as it were. And if you are to watch it, you'll probably see why. And I know, I can see why he picked this for this particular episode. Now, for me, this was foundational as a kid in getting into movies. We would be camping in the summer, and sometimes I would watch this on a little TV, like a tiny one, and I would be the Bob Hoskins character. I would have, like, the squirt guns would be like my little detective gun. And I remember I used to have these like bottles, these glass bottles of tea that I would get from like the store. And because I didn't really realize that he was drinking whiskey, and so I would drink tea, and I was like this hard-boiled detective when I was a little kid. And that and sort of the link to cartoons growing up, Merry Melodies and so forth, really got me into this. And later as an adult, when I started watching Humphrey Bogart and, you know, the Third Man kind of films of the world, I realized that this thing was like just such a brilliant commentary on those old movies, while still being something with its own personality, its own story to tell. And one of the best lessons that you can learn from the Roger Rabbit picture is as simple as don't judge a book by its cover. There is so much that Eddie Valiant needs to let go of, that dealing with the silly Roger Rabbit kind of helps him to understand there's a lot more to the humanity of these tunes. There's a lot more to their emotions, and like it sort of has almost like a social commentary element to it, right? Like classism and things like that are explored here. You can find critiques of this about how this movie does cover like material conditions of different races, like historically, like there's all this different stuff that you can see in the film. So I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's going to be an all-time favorite for me. I've got the 4K here, which you should definitely check out if you haven't. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen it or you haven't in a while, what your thoughts are. And if you have any other film noir movies you want me to cover or talk about, let me know. I'm always looking for ideas for that series. Until then, we'll see you next time on Cody in the Cinema.